Hi, I'm Gina Wells,
Hi, I'm Kat Toon.
and this is the Success Principles Podcast. Michigan is known as the birthplace of Motown, headquarters to the auto industry, and home of the beautiful Great Lakes. The Success Principles Podcast features professionals and entrepreneurs with ties to this great state who have demonstrated innovation and success both within and outside of our Mittens border.
Hello and welcome to the Success Principles Podcast. I am very excited to have our good friend Matt Dery on with us today. Gina and I were lucky enough to be guests on Matt's podcast, Inside Financial Architects, a few weeks ago. So we are thrilled to have him on as our guest.
For sure.
And yeah, Matt is the Communications and Recruiting and Business Development Director for Financial Architects in Farmington Hills. And many people might recognize Matt and his famous voice from his years as a sports talk radio host locally for WDFM, 97.1 The Ticket, and 105.1. And wait, there's more. He's currently the TV analyst for Eastern Michigan University basketball and the host of the Officials Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pod, and Locked On Lions daily podcast. And as well, you're also the fill-in talk show host for 92.3 The Fan FM in Cleveland.
Whew.
That's a lot, ladies. I mean,
And when do you have time to sleep, Matt?
I really don't. I don't do a ton of sleeping because obviously you guys mentioned FAI and how busy I am and how much I love doing that. But yeah, I still dabble in the sports broadcasting realm as well. So there are some long days, but it's all good.
Great. Well, this is about our Michigan roots and how successful we've become as Michigan residents. Tell us a little bit about your Michigan background, where you grew up, where you went to school, things like that, Matt.
Gina, it's an honor to be on with you guys. I consider myself a Michigander now. I moved here in August of '96, being a lifelong Clevelander, but really I've been here longer than I've been anywhere other than maybe, 4 years of college at Syracuse and then the first 17 and a half, 18 years of my life in Cleveland. But I really love it here. This has been home. I met my current wife here, and it's a great place. And lucky for me, we were clients back in 2011 when I got remarried. My wife and I, this is our second crack at this thing and our last, knock on wood. Oh yeah. And we were flying back from Vegas, and we got married in Vegas, and my wife says, what are we doing about our finances? What are we going to do? And I said, I think I got some rollover and some IRA. I don't know. We're fine. We don't, we're flying back from Vegas. We just got married. She's like, no. Seriously, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And lucky enough, she had a friend who knew Turner Thompson at Financial Architects, and that marriage sort of was made as we met Turner. And obviously, Gina and Kat, you both know him so well. And,
oh yeah.
My story with FAI and then everything else, it all kind of the best parts of my life certainly have been here in Michigan. I went to Syracuse for sports broadcasting. I was able to be at WAER there, the sports station there that brought that started the careers of guys like Marv Albert, Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, Sean McDonough, a lot of these famous sports broadcasters. That's all I knew. That's all I wanted to do. And realized a few years back after kind of a rocky stint at 105.1, and that station eventually went under, that it was time to kind of get out of this thing full time and find something else. And I spent 3 years at U of D Jesuit teaching communications and media. It was the greatest. It was the greatest. I'm always going to be indebted to the Cubs and to that school. But now working at Financial Architects is even much more fun and rewarding. So it's been a great past few years professionally, for sure.
Yeah. We just crossed the border, Matt. That's all.
That's right. And obviously the speed limit, you know this, Gina, for all your travels, the speed limit here in Michigan is much better.
Good.
So
yeah.
we drive faster here in Michigan than we do in Ohio. That's for sure.
No turnpikes.
That's right. Well, not anymore, unless I go home to visit my mom or my brother and pay the toll. But yes, that is true.
Right.
Okay, so you went to Syracuse, went for broadcast journalism, correct? Or communications. And So you had mentioned, what brought you into Michigan then?
So I was working. So I graduate college, and all these Syracuse guys, we all think we're like, hot, what, like, hey, hire us, we're all going to get jobs. And we were good, but lucky enough, and you guys know this, it's who you know. And one of my dad's very good friends, who actually recently passed away, Les Levine, was the afternoon talk show host at WHK in Cleveland. And I talked to Les, and I wanted to come home, and I wanted to be in Cleveland. I wanted to be on the radio in Cleveland. As a kid, that's all I did was sit in my room sometimes and listen to whether it was Joe Tate, my idol, the voice of the Cavs at the time, or talk radio in Cleveland. I wanted to be on the air back home. So I got that opportunity in 95 when I graduated to work at WHK. But a year later, we started getting wind that the station was going to be sold. We all got fired. So in July, it was, you're all gone. So my 1 year of living out a dream was over. I was still living at home. And I knew Dave Pash, who was here in Detroit at the time, is now the voice of the Arizona Cardinals and works at ESPN. I contacted Dave. I'm like, hey, I need to work. I need a job. What do you guys have at WDFN? He's like, actually, we're looking for a reporter and probably a nighttime sports anchor. So I applied and got the job. I moved to Detroit in August of '96, and I've never left.
That's great. Now, you and your wife said that you were clients of financial architects. So
Yes.
that experience that you had with the two of them, Turner Thompson and everybody, was good. And how was it that you said, I kind of like to do what you're doing? I think more people need to know about this. But tell us a little bit about that transition.
It's crazy because we were out to dinner with Turner a few years back. And, and if you know anything about Turner, he was like, I know you love this school thing, but I think you need to be back out there. And he kept telling me that. I was going to retire at U of D. I absolutely loved it. I bonded with those kids, the parents. It was so rewarding. You're in radio for so long, and to hear parents tell you you're doing a great job or thank you for touching the lives of our kids or whatever it was nice. It was a nice change of pace from in radio where, to be quite honest with you, a lot of times you're treated very poorly. You're not communicated with, and it's not a family. It's kind of a dog eat dog business. Mm-hmm. So we were talking to Turner, and he mentioned that Pat Marody and Chris Cousins were going to be taking over at FAI. And the next time we went in to meet with Turner, it was actually going to be with Pat to sort of take over, I guess, our accounts or whatever, and he would be our advisor. And so we talked to Pat, and he and Chris were having a conversation with me, and they said, what do you know about marketing? And I said, well, I know a lot from my days in radio. And they're like, what do you think about what we do at FAI? And I was kind of honest with them, and I said, it could be a lot better, actually. Now, what did I know back then in that meeting about compliance and I'm going to check things? And
let's be clear, too. Let's be clear. It's the marketing that could be better, right? Your financial planning was marvelous.
Oh, the financial planning was great. No. I'm talking about the... Thank you. You got me in trouble with my bosses.
I know. I want to clear it up.
Thank you. So, but I said, the marketing wise, like, yeah, things could be better. Like, what about social media? What about doing a podcast? What about a webinar series? So, like, we could do that. I said, yeah. And they're like, well, how long does that take? I said, I could do a pilot show tonight when I get home. And the guys look at each other like, this is great. Mm-hmm. So they were talking and basically saying, can you come help us? And I figured, yeah, a couple days a week after school, maybe, sure. And then they were like, well, what about every day? And my wife's elbowed me in this meeting like, hey, dummy, I think they want you to come work here. So the drive home from Farmington Hills to Shelby Township was a lengthy one, as it always is on 696. Mm-hmm. And plus I'm turning to Heather, my wife, saying, what do I do? Because I love U of D. And she's like, you'll never leave. You love those kids. And I said, what do you think I should do? And she said, you need to keep talking to these guys. They are awesome. And next thing you know, I came aboard a couple years ago in 2019 and absolutely love what I'm doing.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, Gina, you've been associated with financial architects for a long time, and I have been for a few years, and I've seen the impact that what you've done has made. And talk a little bit about, it's a different world now with how you have to get your name out there and market things, and it seems like you have to do you have to have your foot in all types of different platforms. Talk a little bit about that and what you're doing and how you do that.
Oh, for sure. And the two of you do a heck of a job with it. And there's got to be at some point and I know you guys are doing it at FDS, a rebrand, some sort of fresh look. You got to always keep things fresh. Ken and Turner, when they started FAI, the website looked good. Their messaging is amazing. Our messaging is amazing, empowering your financial freedom. And, we want our clients to live a life of freedom by simplifying the complexity of money decisions. Boom, that's what we do. So that one-liner, that messaging, I've kind of come in and said, listen, we've got to hammer it as much as we can, whether it's 2-3 days a week on Facebook, on our pages, on our LinkedIn's. Get the advisors involved as well. They've got pages, but maybe they don't post once. Maybe they put an article out once a month. That's not good enough. Now you've got to be out there, not necessarily overdoing it where you're posting every day. And here's a picture of my dog in the backyard. Okay, that might be a little overkill. But what are we doing? Asking a question, putting a call to action out there. During the pandemic, especially, Chris Cousins came to me and said, I have an idea for a web show. What do you think? Because we're all home. We all can turn our Zooms on and our GoToMeetings on, be on camera, and have discussions about what's going on.
Right.
Can we do this business and leaders roundtable? I go, let's do it now. And so because of my acumen, I'm okay on camera and stuff. Chris is like, you're hosting. Let's go. What's this going to cost us? Like $0. We have cameras. We can get on to GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting, pay a little bit for them to help us. But as far as editing, putting it all together, I could do that. And we made it happen. So yes, you've got to constantly be putting yourself out there and letting people know what your message is. FAI is never going to do what David Hall does or the Bernstein Advantage and just, dripping to the point where it's immense. Number one, for compliance, it's probably not something you can do. And number two, you don't want to overdo it. We want to reach out to the people that know us, the people that maybe don't know us, and say, hey, quickly, here's what our message is, and it's positive, and here's how you get a hold of us, and just kind of stay top of mind. And so there's that balance there, but I like that I'm able to offer that and help our advisors and even our support team with their LinkedIn pages and just freshening things up and making it look good.
Yeah, that's great. When you talk about the Bernsteins and all of that kind of thing, that's radio, TV, that's big money, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't come cheap.
Yeah.
And so, think about that for a moment when it comes to what do you want to do that you can do that doesn't really cost an arm and a leg and gets you in front of the right people. Because isn't marketing truly getting in front of the people who you want to talk to and want to talk to you?
Exactly. And Gina, when you were talking to us on Inside at Financial Architects about the target markets that you and Kat dip into, if you're good there and you're successful there and they can help with referrals and putting the word out to the people that they know, that's all you need. When I like the Bernsteins and I know David Hall and guys like that.
Yeah.
Mark Z, the Z guarantee. We can't say guarantee in our office. That's against the rules. You can't say we're going to guarantee this rate of return and all. Those are conversations that compliance wise you got to be careful with. So you want to say things that are certainly welcoming. But you're right. It's about getting in front of people that will then get in front of their people and let them know, hey, folks at Financial Architects are great people. They're macro planners that take a look at everything and they're inviting. And if it's not a fit, they're not going to be somebody that's going to get angry or get mad or kick you out of their office. It's not how we operate. Right. Maybe the personal side with the life method and what we do would be a fit for you. We got this Q5 venture going right now with business owners and maybe looking to do some succession and exit planning. Right. So there's a lot that we offer, and but it's good people and a good office. That you're right. It's still about getting in front of folks that you know and being comfortable with people. That's where it starts.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had mentioned. I remember talking to you a couple of weeks or a few weeks after you had started, and it was like compliance. We're such a highly regulated industry that it's different from just being able to get out there and say whatever you want. Not that that's a bad thing, but pivoting back to going from an industry like sports and entertainment into such a highly regulated industry, what have you found are some of the challenges in trying to get the message out there?
Well, I'll say this: Kim Keith, who runs our compliance at FAI, is amazing. And you're right, because like the first couple weeks, I'm like a postaholic on, Cord Otterbine's Facebook, Jim Lininger's, Dan Zeck's, Kyle Zweer, and all these people are coming to me saying, "Can you help me?" And I'm putting stuff out there. And then I walk by Kim's office. She's like, "What?" Kim's office. She's like, "What are you doing? Check that stuff with me." You know that. I'm like, "Oh, just because I'm so used to." You're right. If you're working in sports radio and you do a great interview, you want to immediately hop on Twitter or the station's Facebook page and brag about it. And I had Golden Tate, the former Lions receiver, on my show, 1051, admitting on the show that the other team knew the plays that were coming. So they would be on the field and the play would be, let's say, a pass was incomplete on first down. Tate would run back to the huddle. They'd break the huddle, and the Seahawks or the Rams or whoever was on defense would say to Golden Tate, "We know where you're going. We know that Stafford's going to throw to you on the right side." And Tate's like, "What is going on?" So the Lions were so bad that their calls at the line of scrimmage, the other team knew it was coming. So this was like huge news. So I get mentioned on Monday Night Football that week that Tate went on my show and said this. So we're tweeting out like every quote he's saying and getting it out like, "Oh my gosh." So that's the message that you want to put out there when you're in sports radio and sports media, is constantly dripping, but the Twitter, the Facebook, and getting the clicks. With us, it's not necessarily about clicks. It's about what the quality of the message is, letting folks know about what you do. I wouldn't say it's necessarily frustrating, but it is a lot different in that you got to word it a certain way. There's certain words you stay away from, and I've learned that now, Kat, in a couple of years.
Yeah, yes, too.
Careful, you guys know. So it's like, but I still love it, and I still love the fact that we might not get as many eyeballs on it as the sports fan that's on Twitter. But when Pat and Chris come back to me and say, "Hey, that was great," or "This looks really good," for many years in radio, it was like you didn't get a lot of that. That business sometimes can really suck the joy out of you.
Sure. Who were your mentors growing up? Who really got you to be who you are today? Who did you look up to and learn from as you created the career you created for yourself?
I mean, it starts with my late father. He was in the family business. Our family business when I was growing up was Dalton Industries. They manufactured women's clothing. And eventually when that went under in the mid 90s, my dad got into a lot of sales consulting and secret shopping. He would work for companies, go in as like an undercover shopper in, let's say, a shoe store, or he worked for what was the one, glasses in an hour or contacts in less than an hour.
I remember that.
Yeah. And he would write a report and say, "This salesperson was rude. I waited 3 minutes in the store and nobody came up and greeted me and asked me if they could help me." And so that he did the sales consulting. And not only was he a great professional, and I learned about people skills from him and sales and consulting and how important it is to have a smile on your face, shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye. But he was just also a great man. Like I said, he passed away in 04. But he was truly not only just my dad, but also a mentor for me. And then I mentioned before, like all these broadcast guys, but Joe Tate was the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And you just listen to Joe, whether he always painted the picture of obviously the basketball game and all of that, but he would tell you if he was in an arena and he was way up high and he was ticked off that they sent him up high and not courtside, he'd tell you throughout the game, "Well, if I could see from being 10, 15, 25 rows up," but he painted that picture. So it was always important for me when I got into broadcasting to do sort of the same thing. And I got to know Joe very well. He recently died too.
I'm sorry to hear.
A couple of years ago. I know. Awesome dude. But like, I just always knew that's the conversational stuff, the people skills, the talking, which obviously you guys can see I can do.
Yeah.
I got from mentors like that for sure.
Yeah. So Matt, you were diehard Cleveland. You had thought at one point you wanted to be in Cleveland, talk about the sports teams there. We just recently talked to your buddy Ryan Fields.
Yeah.
He sort of talked about, he had the opposite. He moved from Michigan to LA and then ultimately to New York now. And he talked about still being that hardcore Detroit sports team fan.
Ryan totally is. He's
yeah.
And he loves his Pistons. He loves his Pistons.
Now, where are you on that whole scenario? Have you retained your Cleveland sports fan status? Is this something you want to admit to?
It's not that I don't want to admit. I will be honest. So Kat and I met when I worked for the Pistons.
Oh, great.
So I want the Pistons to do well. So I am definitely a Pistons fan. I do their podcast once a week. I did it, actually recorded a new one today. So on that, the Cleveland Indians are like in my blood. Like that's the team that is so number one for me. I love baseball. The sport has so many flaws, and there's so much wrong with it right now, and it's boring to a lot of people. But I'm 47. I love the game, and so the Tribe is still my number one. So I know we're going to be changing our team name soon, and who knows with all that. But so I'm a big Indians fan. When I go to Comerica Park, it's only when the Indians are in town. I despise the Tigers. I do not like them. I did not like them as a kid when Jack Morris and Lou Whitaker and Trammell would come in and just beat our butts. I'd say another word, but so I don't like them. And like, it's funny. When I worked in radio, I had a run-in once with a player who like came after me in the clubhouse in a towel. His name was Robert Fick because he didn't like something I said on the radio, and he basically MF'd me up and down. So I have so many stories with them. So I've never really said like, oh, I'm going to work for the Tigers or be a Tigers fan. Yeah. Lions, I grew up a diehard Browns fan. I was there for the drive in '86 when John Elway went 98 yards. I was in the stadium for that. I still want them to do well. My mom and my brother still go to all the games. I hope the Lions do well. It's good for my podcast when they do, and it would be so nice. Could you guys imagine if the Lions ever won this thing? The city would burn down. I mean, it would be like the greatest celebration in the history on Woodward Avenue.
I don't know what to do.
It would be, unbelievable. So Indians number one. I root for the other, Detroit teams not named the Tigers. Hockey, I don't care. I mean, Red Wings, they're cool with me. And then Syracuse basketball. So I don't really have a Michigan or Michigan State angle there for you either.
I was going to say, don't let Pat Marody know you don't care about hockey. However, one of the things that you're doing is probably bringing the fans to listen to your podcast. And I wanted to hear some of the new things that you're doing with Financial Architects. You're actually bringing people who meet with the structure of Financial Architects to the agents who can help them. And you're participating in that. So part of your job there at Financial Architects, besides marketing, is also kind of helping with the client base. So tell us a little bit about how all that goes down and how you help to bring the right person to the right advisor.
Well, no, Gina, I appreciate you asking that. Business development, it is about, you're right, bringing the right people and the right fit. I know I've done a few minutes now in sort of saying that I'm not trashing the media business, but people say, how many of your old buddies from the radio have you brought to Financial Architects as maybe a possible prospect? I think maybe like one, maybe two. We know what we're looking for in terms of who we want to work with. And it is a sort of specific, loving husband, wife, family environment. And so with business, what's been kind of fun is reconnecting with folks, whether it's on LinkedIn or whatever, doing, like you said, some interviews where we've talked to some folks, whether it's inside Financial Architects or on our Living the Life Method podcast, where they tell their stories, and then I'll get to know them a little bit better and say, hey, listen, maybe you would want to have a conversation about your money decisions with one of our people. And I'm not pushy about it. I know that's a very personal situation for a lot of people. But it's how you kind of finesse it. But the amount of people that I know and the way that I can sort of deliver our message and tell people that it is such an inviting place, that's worked out. I brought, I think, some folks aboard with us that have been really good fits. And there's some younger clients that we brought in that really had no idea about macro planning and looking at everything. They immediately were saying, what are you going to sell me? Or do I have to buy something? I'm like, no, let's just have a conversation. I'll make an introduction, and if it's not a wow, then you can slap me across the face. Seriously. And most of the times, good news is that a lot of it has been a wow, and we've taken pretty good care of them and taking a look at their whole picture. And so that's worked out. It's been fun, and it's great to be on the phone again with people and just reconnecting, and then kind of mentioning about what we do at FAI.
The experience that clients get when they can have a conversation where they're not feeling inundated to do something or be pressured to do something. They're learning something new that they've never learned before, right? The financial
Yep.
architecture of how money really works. So when you bring someone to the table, right, what was it that they may have said? They don't work with an advisor. They haven't heard that before. What are some of the things that you go, wow, you'd be a good fit to come and speak with an advisor?
It's funny. When I got started at the company, at the firm, Pat and Chris kind of had to coach me up on what our messaging is and how different we are from the rest. I have friends in the financial business. I know people at, other shops and all this, and they sometimes will say to me, "Hey, when they leave for that first meeting, do you have them leave the check with the secretary?" I'm like, nobody leaves checks. Like, that's not how we operate. We go through a process and see if they're a fit. And if not, there's no, disdain or hatred or anybody being upset. It's just, we want to work with good people because we feel like we're good people. So, you know, some of the things that you mentioned to them is macro and looking at everything and seeing and not necessarily getting into specifics until we get way down the road, just to like you said, Gina, to see if there's a fit. And the whole architecture thing it's something that's different from everybody else in terms of we're looking at this blueprint of, when I tell the story sometimes when we got into about the second or third meeting with Turner, he asked about where we had my wife and I some of our portfolio accounts, and I told him where it was that I had, and I told him I really love the guy, and I was cringing, waiting for him to say, "Well, we're going to move it over. You're going to call Tom and tell him it's over." And instead, he went, "Oh, that's great. You like him? He stays. Next question." And I felt like, wow, that's somebody. This would be somebody I would want to work with that has the understanding and knowledge that they listened to me and heard me say, "I'm comfortable with where that is right now," not forcing me to. So I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but that's the kind of stories that you tell people. It's like, look, we're going to make it comfortable for you and not hold your feet to the fire on checking every box. If there's a few boxes we can check and we can help you, that's great. That's what I think makes Financial Architect such a special place.
Well, and Matt, you too have such a unique perspective coming from being an actual client into helping guide people through this process, being the introduction point into the same process. And Gina and I always say, we're not an or type of business. We're not going to say you can do this or this. We say you can do an and, you can do this and this, and we're going to help bring it all together, just like Financial Architects does. So,
right, exactly.
As a client for you, that point that Turner told you we're an and business was a big kind of aha moment. What else? What else in your process were some of the things that made you realize you were at the right firm?
Turner used to, some places you go from the door to the conference room, back to the door, maybe the bathroom in the hallway, and you're gone. Turner is walking me through the offices, the cubicles. Hey, and that's what, he's insane. I love the man. He's like, a father to me too. But he'd be introducing me, and some of the guys at the office knew who I was from my radio background, but there were others that had no idea who I was, and I didn't care. I wasn't walking in there with a giant WDFN sign or 97 the ticket or wherever I was working at the time. I was in there with my wife trying to figure out how, if there's anything that they could help us with, and so that resonated with me, and so then when I'm meeting with Pat and Chris and they're going, "Hey, maybe come aboard," I had already known everybody in the office. Jan Winters, I knew Jan, but barely, but always saying hello. Everybody was so inviting and so nice. And again, coming from radio where it was like at times, you want to be at a place like that. You want to go to work every day and be teammates with folks that really get it. Gina's wasn't in our office every day, but when we saw her, she's saying hello to everybody. And it was like I knew her for 10, 15 years. Kat, same thing. So
you did know me for 10, 15 years.
I did. I mean, Kat was a palace legend back in the day. We'll dive into that later. But so that was a huge selling point for me. Is, man, I know all these people just from walking around and being walked around by by Turner and certainly Ken as well. And so why not want to be there every day with those folks? It's such a life changer for me to be able to get up every day and be on that team. I'm honored. I really am.
Right. And they're honored to have you, and as are we to have you on the show. Now, as you talk about all of the history that you've had, and now you're at Financial Architects, you still have a lot of things going on outside of Financial Architects that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But all centered around marketing. So as you see all of these marketing things and you help direct people to do better marketing or get the right message out, what would be the one takeaway from this podcast? Someone listening who's like, I have LinkedIn, I've got Facebook, I've got this, I've got that, but none of us put together. Is the number one thing finding somebody like you to help organize it? Because, I certainly couldn't do what you do, nor do I want to. But it takes the marketing mind to do it.
Right. No, I think, keeping the message simple and consistent and being yourself is huge. Like I said, we've got some great people at Financial Architects. Aislinn Coachman, who works with us, she's a star, man. So with Aislinn, it's like so brilliant and so bright that you want to put that out there, but not suffocate folks with it. It's once in a while with her and kind of the messaging that she brings, but she keeps it simple. I sat in on an initial meeting, just an intro meeting with her one time, and she kept it real simple. And she said, here's what we do, and it was positive. In 2021, especially after everything that we've been through, there's so much negativity out there. And if you can keep the message positive, pretty simple, stick to kind of your core values and kind of answer that why question, I think you're good to go. As far as things like podcasts, I was talking to a friend at a different shop that they do a podcast as well, and they asked me about it. Make sure your microphones work, make sure that stuff is clean, clear. Some of these pods that folks ask me to listen to, they're like an hour and a half long. And I'm like, no. You want your podcast to be 20, 25 minutes, a drive to work where you get one episode. Right. And keep it short and sweet. Those are just some of the tips that I give. I worked with Drew Lane for a little while at 105.1, Drew and Mike show. They have a podcast and they go 2-3 hours, but they have such a niche listenership and fan base that they've had built in for 20, 25 years. They can get away with that.
Yeah. I listen
with us and doing new things. You want to keep it simple, short, get in, get out, because now people's attention spans are a lot shorter. You guys know
limited.
That.
Right. Yep. We are, and as a matter of fact, we are at the end of our time limit. Is there anything besides all that? That was great tidbits there, Kat. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just kind of want to know what's next.
Gosh.
Financial Architect?
A glass of wine? No. Is it too early? No. What's next? I think we just want to continue at Financial Architects, and I say we because I really love being on this team. We just want to continue to build, and now that during the pandemic, many folks said we're shutting things down or we're going to pause a lot of things. Pat and Chris said, what can we do? And they came up with this idea of the Q5 experience being this business exit planning collaboration with Financial Architects, Absolute Succession, a succession planning company, and the Life Method, Empowering Futures, which helps empower people from a personal standpoint and work with them. Some of our clients work with them when they have personal life events that have happened to them. So let's combine the two, the three, get these business owners that maybe are saying, look, in 3 years, I'm getting out. But who do I talk to? Do I just call my lawyer? Do I talk to my CPA? But if you come with us at this Q5 experience, you're going to get the financial side, looking at your macro plan, the business side with the Absolute Succession and John Carter, looking at, all right, what can you get for your business? How's it doing? And then if you're selling to a family member or somebody like that, and there's friction or, man, my kids are going to buy the company from me or I'm going to sell to them, but they're not ready, going through a personal sort of checklist and some talks with our coaches at Life Method, I think this Q5 thing is going to be awesome. So we're excited about that. We're building upon that at the firm, and I'm helping kind of push that. And so that's been a lot of fun over the past few months.
Well, you will be very happy to hear that I have spoken to John about being a guest. We're working on getting a time for him to be a podcast guest.
Hey,
Oh,
I'm
wow,
happy to hear
nice.
that also.
Yes.
All right, Kat. Well, listen, Matt, we've enjoyed having you on our show today, and thank you for having us on yours. And we'll continue to get the message out there, podcast, and glad that your success principles have led you to Michigan.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys so much. I have an immense amount of respect for you. I love what you guys are doing. It's one of my favorite LinkedIn stops, always seeing the two of you. You know what you're doing, and folks that work with you, I know usually always have a smile on their face. And thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Have a
Thanks,
great day.
Matt.
Thank you so much for listening to our show. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate that you have taken the time to stop by for a bit.
For more information about the topics we discussed today, there are links in the show notes for your reference. If you'd like to learn more about the Success Principles podcast and about Kat and myself, go to www.successprinciplespodcast.com. Gina Wells is an investment advisor representative of Retirement Wealth Advisors Incorporated, an SEC registered advisor. Success Principles Podcast and RWA are not affiliated. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. This information should not be considered tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with professionals specialized in fields of tax, legal, accounting, or investments regarding the applicability of the information for their situation. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments will fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than originally invested.